Ace from SAC, which also contributed. David Kelly's books include Instructions for Viewing a Solar Eclipse from Wesleyan University Press, 1972, Filming Assassinations from Ithaca House in 1979, At a Time, A Dance for Voices, All Here Together, Great Lakes Cycle, etc. His poetry has appeared in numerous literary magazines and anthologies, including The Atlantic, North American Review, Choice, Ann Arbor Review, Prairie Schooner, California Quarterly, the Iowa Review, etc. His grants and awards include the Atlantic Monthly Younger Poet Award, the NEA Discovery Award, the NEA Poetry Fellowship, the CAPS Poetry Fellowship, and a SUNY Research Fellowship, among others. He received degrees in journalism and comparative literature from Michigan State University and an MFA in creative writing from the University of Iowa. He has been poet in residence and associate professor of English at State University of New York in Geneseo since 1968. One of our famous 20th century philosophers once said that we have we have art in order that we may not perish from truth. And another American writer went on a little bit further and said that truth doesn't change. Truth is one thing. It touches all things which touch the heart. And I think David Kelly's poems especially deal with this kind of truth. Please welcome David Kelly.
I guess out of sheer perversity, that prefigures the first poem I'm going to read. I wasn't going to read from this book, but it just popped into my head. This is a very short visual exercise called Fishing, which I wrote while staying at a summer cottage during the winter while a house that had been on fire was being repaired. That's also secondary. The first light from the sun rising at my back touches the houses on the far shore of the lake, bringing them out from the dark trees. A chill breathes in the air as I yawn and stoop to turn the skiff over and pull it toward the water. My feet feel the first cold waves. In the water now, I climb into the boat and pull off with an oar from the shallows, watching the color deepen and the lake's floor disappear. I fit an oar into the lock and my feet against the ridge on the boat's floor and set my back against the steady pull. I angle south down the shore. The house behind you shadows you and the dock as I pull up to it. You hand me your pole and slide easily from the dock, feet first, into the boat. I turn the boat out toward the center of the lake, and we slide back over the weeds and the rocks till we can't see the bottom, and I rest the oar. I am not sitting in a skiff in the middle of the lake. I never fish, but I do row sometimes. I am sitting at an oak desk in a house writing a false poem. That's my truth. I'll just read. Since I'm in this book, I'll read one or two other poems. One, I guess I'll read because it's the sort of thing that now is refitting into the social landscape. Somebody was commenting the other day on how, given the cycles of history that particularly I think this country goes through, you can very often recycle your old poems by simply changing names, place names, and dates. And I can think of a few cities and places I would change just to know. The title of the poem is The Bombing of Hanoi. In the 1960s and 70s, it was fairly easy to tell what the government was doing in Southeast Asia because all you had to do was watch the evening news and notice what the the spokesman for the Pentagon or the spokesman for the State Department said we had not done, and then you could be certain that this had been done. And so this poem was written after a particularly emphatic denial on the part of Dean Rusk, I think, that we were not bombing the city of Hanoi. So this is called the bombing of Hanoi. The sirens are ringing over Hanoi. Americans have been sighted flying north from a spot some distance away. In 15 minutes, they will be over the city and their bellies will open like bloodless sores. A mistake has been made. They are not bombing oil or the rails where there are no humans, only soldiers and military trains. They are bombing the schools and cities. The eyes of the children fail to believe. On a piece of dry dirt in Oklahoma, Norma 30 Acres sits on rough boards in the reservation school and listens while the thin white lady tells about heritage as Norma rolls the louse she's caught in a ball with the ball of her thumb. We have been told we are right. We forget the holes in the speakers' throats and keep the words they speak. In the projects in Southside Chicago, BJ and Willie come up behind Bobby Joe Jones and break his skull against the fountain as he drinks. A young psychopath lies in a hospital bed on the other side of town while 8 nurses scream in his eyes. There have been 35 gangland executions in Boston the last 30 months, and the jelly falls on children in Hanoi, burning them like so much screaming paper. In Chicago, the surviving nurses change bedpans and take pulses, and on the south side, a local drinking fountain gives off the taste of brain for at least a week. Well, one of the things I try to do is tie a few things together, and sometimes all you have to do is watch an hour of news and things seem anyway to fall together, fit together fairly well. I noticed the gunships now that we're supplying Nicaragua on the evening news and the free fire zones that are being created in the area. The language is so similar, it's kind of almost a nostalgic thing. Okay, I didn't want particularly to read out of that book, but just a couple anyway. I do want to read a few from the volume that's on sale this afternoon at reasonable rates, Filming Assassinations. The first poem I'll read is called Cycle for My Father, and it's in 4 or 5 parts. 5. The first section treats with the deaths in various ways of the fathers of a number of friends of mine at various times in my life. And among them is more or less my father's death. He had died in a hospital not too long before I wrote the first part. I had written these parts over a number of years, actually. I'd written a couple before my father died, one almost right after he had died, and a couple of years later. So it fit together a number of years after that as a kind of composite of moods and things. 1. A man is found dead in his garden, or a man is not found dead in his garden. He is found on the floor of his office over a sheaf of building plans, or in the back seat of his car next to his daughter's best friend, also dead, or at the end of a knife that is reaching for the hand that abandoned him. Perhaps he is just found dead on the floor beside his hospital bed where everybody had expected to find him in the first place. We have been home for a week now. The goldenrod is ripe in the side yard, making my oldest daughter choke in the thick August air. We brought the stray dog back with us, and all the lost cats returned. The boy we hired for the summer kept the lawn we use and the backyard mowed. We were gone for 3 months. While we were gone, I learned to cook excellent spare ribs, to hit a pitched ball left-handed, and to play several Protestant hymns on my daughter's guitars. I started smoking again and lost about 30 pounds. It is probably true that a man is never found dead, that he gets away before we discover him, and that this handful of flowers is lying on ground as empty as the hand that dropped them. It is also probably true that this isn't water we are pouring on a mound of sod and grass, but a voice we went to sleep to, harmonizing with a handsaw when we were small enough to fall asleep on one end of a work table with our father working at the other end. Part 2. The leaves sound like rain in the wind. The ground spiders tie things together. The corpse of a small thing catches my eye at the edge of the yard. I walk to it, a mouse's body without a head, victim of one of the dogs. It is nothing I want. One dog sleeps by the wood bench I sit down on, the wood table I work at. A car speeds past the edge of my sight, and a school bus takes its place on the car road. My smallest daughter's legs fall into view on the far side. A door shuts. She runs to me dressed in red and blue wool. The third one is very flat and is meant to be. He is taller than his father. This pleases him and doesn't bother the old man. Together they sit in the bleachers behind third base, which is the son's position rather than the catcher, his father's years before, and watch the baseman, George Kell, a man with a name much like theirs, Kelly, which is probably why the boy chose that position to play on his own team, a neighborhood team made up of boys from the ages of 10 to 14 and wearing white polo shirts with the legend McWilliams Stores across the chest and numbers on the back. The father is smoking a large, inexpensive cigar and leans over from the waist from time to time to spit down between the bleachers. He explains to his son that although he enjoys a cigar once in a while, he can only smoke them outdoors as they make him have to spit so much. At other intervals during the game, the father smokes hand-rolled Bull Durham cigarettes. The scores chronologically in the game are 0-0, then 1-0, then 2-1, 2-2, 4-2, and finally 5-2. After the game, they walk home through the stadium neighborhood with a stop at a tavern where the father has beer and a shot of whiskey and the boy has a glass of Coke. When they get home, they walk in through the front door and past the living room where the mother is sitting mending a sock. She asks them if they had a good time, and they both answer yes. She thinks they are probably telling the truth. Final section is 5. We accumulate a life, begin with a person, a pet bird, a house, perhaps some simple furniture, let it be of wood. The walls will be too, and you will be dressed in wool and other simple things, some leather for the feet, some cotton, the one extravagance, a ring made from gold and topaz, but not a precious stone, and not too well made either, and then a crude mat of straw for your head. Now, let us put you in your garden, a rich place in which you let weeds grow as well as flowers, your hat pushed back to wipe sweat from your forehead, trowel dripping dirt in your right hand, and the promise of flowers bright in your eye. In the stove inside, a wood fire waits. At this page, a poet is beginning to know you. Okay, this is a very quick picture. I had 3 daughters, one of whom was a toe walker when she was first walking. She walked like a ballerina up on her toes wherever she went. And she was quite tubby, so it was an interesting combination. And she just sort of went by me one afternoon, and this poem came out of it. It's called Baby. Baby trots by on tiptoes, little pig feet, my hairy chin, the fat peach cheek of her. Last night we gave her rum to sleep by, fast asleep, but trot right by on pink pig toes. A grape, her moon-full face cracks wide, impossible face of smile, nice, her nice is nice. We didn't slug great glasses of rum down. when they're teething, you sometimes rub some on them and put a little jot in their milk and helps them pass the night. Two others I want to read out of here, I guess. This first is called The Diary, and came more or less from two experiences. One was my working as a police reporter in a city newspaper in the Midwest for a while, and covering a few accidents like this. And then when I was living in Iowa, reading an article about a couple who had died in an accident, and this, in the crash, in the wreckage somewhere, they had found the diary of the girl who had been in the car. But it sort of goes off into a series of tangents which have a hard time getting back to where they began. This is the beginning of the first page of a diary. Today I am going to Sioux Falls with Leon. That morning she was killed in a small car beneath a truck. It rained that morning and a pope was ill and the Braves lost, but the important facts were about Sioux Falls and Leon, and that she was going there with him, or that she and he were going somewhere, and that she was beginning a diary that would end on the same page and day she began it. The important facts to the state police were the skid marks measured along a wet road and from lane to lane and recorded. To a truck driver from Cleveland, Ohio, the importance lay in the number of crushed ribs the x-rays would show, and whether or not his chauffeur's license would be revoked, and if it was, then how he would pay the room and board of a youngest son locked in a home for the moronic, and what to do with a house he'd never been able to afford, and a nervous wife who had trouble sleeping nights. In Cleveland, the wife was busy with the neighbor's son home from college and beside her in bed for the week. She hoped she'd be able to get him out of it before the neighborhood came awake and the cleaning lady came for the day. He was still asleep when the telephone rang. The gum-chewing girl who connected the call had been worried all week about a boyfriend who was standing now since dawn in mud in a camp in Georgia, and who hadn't answered the letter that told him what the doctor had said because he was busy with a fat sergeant with heartburn. She disconnected the call before the nervous wife learned that her husband was not dead, and the cleaning lady, troubled in mind by an oldest son whose income depended on the earnings of two young girls in hotels in Cleveland, came up the walk, heard a scream, and saw a frightened college kid break through the door and flash by her across the damp lawn with his clothes half on and vanish into the house next door. A nurse walked into an Iowa hospital room with a syringe filled with Dolophine. Two sets of Iowa parents, still a little sleepy, looked at two young faces under lifted sheets in two rooms in the emergency ward. And a young reporter from a bankrupt small-town paper opened a book he'd found on the wet road and read the first lines, "Today I am going to Sioux Falls with Leon." That also works out of a particular fascination of mine with what I call the star at somebody else's wedding or a funeral, whichever the case may be, and involves my having observed a number of sort of key events in people's lives when they get married, when they get confirmed, when they get buried, etc., at which, while they're the central figure, there are always at least half a dozen other people who come as guests but throw some sort of tantrum or emotional crisis to draw all of the attention to them instead of to what's really supposed to be going on. Okay, this next poem is called Wolves of North America, and is based on, I think, a Frederick Remington picture. I don't have a copy anymore, and it's been a while, so I can't really remember. I can remember seeing a photographic print on the cover of a book, which indeed was called Wolves of North America. It was a zoological study of various strains of wolf as they bred on this continent. And that's all. I mean, the picture is of some wolves standing around a bison. And I decided to sort of animate it, all of those cartoons where the toy shop comes alive when the little toy maker leaves and the clock hits midnight. And so this is Wolves of North America. Picture a valley of dry grass and yourself on the rim of it, looking down to the center where you see standing its large shaggy head mowing the ground with the breath from its nostrils, a buffalo, a bull, and very old but huge in size and of a certain greatness. Sitting around him in a half circle, leaning forward from their haunches, are 7 gray wolves. Buffalo wolves, the settlers call them because of the meat they seem to favor. All 8 of the animals are out of breath and face each other without violence now, and the distance between the bull and the teeth that face him remains nearly the same for several minutes. Picture the sun very bright and high, and a nervous horse under you. The rough hair on the buffalo's head is filled with burrs, his tongue hangs black from his mouth, and his hooves paw the ground before him. The wolves pant, return their tongues into their mouths, and nose each other, whimpering and snarling as they squat, rise, turn, and shift, not far from their enemy's head. 3 of them are patched with mange, 5 are males, 2 females. Imagine now that your horse whinnies in fear and turns in a circle, and you barely hear another noise coming from the scene below you. When you've settled your horse, you think it was a groan from the trapped bull, but you're not sure because it was drowned out again immediately by a chorus of howls from the wolves. Then you hear it again, but much louder, and again the cadenced howls, and your horse trembles beneath your legs. Imagine that these animals still have hardly moved in relation to each other, and that as you hear the bull for the 3rd time, and this is a bellow louder than any noise you've ever heard from such a distance, a lone cloud passes across the sun, and the valley becomes gray and dark as the whole 7 wolves answer the bull with a long, low wail. And hear the cry of each of these 8 beasts flowing back and forth between each other, and the deep brass sound of the bull controlling the pace of the others, and listen as you wheel your horse around and leave in the other direction from this meeting to the sudden hush in this chorus, and to what you know, even though the center of the valley is at least a half mile from you, and you probably can't really hear it, are the slick and much quieter percussions as they whisk over each other of 7 sets of very expert teeth. I decided to have that happen after making and seeing other people make dogs howl by making noises at them. And after I had done it in the poem, I did check with some biologists, some people in zoology, and found that it would be in fact possible that the pitch and the tone and the excitement of the wolves might possibly kick them off, so that you had a sort of choir going on between the prey and the predator for a brief time. Okay, I want to work from a manuscript that I finished recently. It's now begging its way in the mails, looking for a home. The tentative title is Insomnia's Photograph. It's a kind of selection of poems that I've done over the years. The first, well, this would be easier actually. That way I don't have to have these up here. The first are from a book that I have a copy of, so I don't have to juggle it, called Great Lakes Cycle, a small book of poems about the Great Lakes. I'll read 3 of those first. Same space there. This is a series that originally was going to be longer. It ended up being 10 poems. I'll just read a few of them. Done while both spending time along the Great Lakes and reading a couple of books. The principal one is a large volume called shipwrecks and drownings in the Great Lakes. Sort of a cheery thing to read when you're staying on a lake or ocean front and it's raining and the wind's blowing and you get out the old shipwrecks and drownings and turn on a light, kick your feet up and have a little hot chocolate. Read some deaths. So I'm going to read 3 of these in an order that now I might have put them in the book. They aren't in that order. The first is called Lost in Lake Michigan. A number of them take their names from dying in Lake Superior, drowning in Lake Erie. So, there are myths all through the histories of the lakes as there are along the oceans and places like that, of course. And I play with some of those in here. And then some regular actual stories of the drownings. The wrecks, of course, in the Great Lakes have a kind of immediate sorrow to them that ocean wrecks don't often have, because the families live along the shores very often. And the funerals are held in churches where the people have actually gone to church themselves or have gone to the funerals of their friend. For example, the Church of the Mariner in Detroit is a central place for tolling out deaths and tragedies in the Great Lakes when they happen. It's referred to in here. So these are all from, sort of based on that fact. There's also those of you who have taken 20th century American fiction courses might see the ghost of a Michigan summer student drifting through at least this one. I don't know if it'll be any of those. Lost in Lake Michigan. Death rides her black horse along the shore, watching for red skies, watching for the Ottawa chief in his ancient canoe, and watching for the mother who combs the sand at Beaver Island year after year for the water-shrunken body of her lost son. It is 50 feet from the top of the hill to the water's edge. It is 10 feet out into the lake to the sunken wood hull, to the dead carrier of apples and the note behind the piano. It is over 100 years from here to the opened eyes of the dead beneath the sand, to the bones of even last week's sad victims. And the Bishop of Saginaw calls on the elements of fire and air as the widows of the men of water scream loss and bread, as the souls of the lost men heave their great weight onto the wooden pews of the Church of the Mariner, as the wedding is canceled deep in the Sacred Heart at the port of the Fatherless. And even the dead know the wind will blow on for 3 days. Even the old man with the shotgun at his mouth feels the blows of ice and cold water against his large back as Horton's Bay collects the shadows face down in their sad orange jackets. Listen, I will take you north for 300 miles, but no further. Man is too greedy for the month of November. See how he forgets the warm, easy fires of shore, the piano of sleep. Listen, I will take you no further than from here to there, and then I want to sleep for a winter without hearing the beads at Detroit telling in Fahrenheit how each of my dreams is as it spills out the holes where my eyes were, as it measures the distance between death and shore, between farewell and home. Listen, I am too young to come home at Charlevoix in a green rubber sack. My bride, small and no heavier than a tear, is too young to wait on the widow's walk, to listen at the side of the leopard-colored stones for an echo of my last cold word. Okay, the majority of shipwrecks take place, in the Great Lakes anyway, in the month of November, because the owners, those great corporate administrators, insist on one last shipping before the winter sets in. And it's always against the advice of the people who actually sail the boats and give advice of a practical nature. That's why boats, as they're called in the Great Lakes, like the Edmund Fitzgerald, go down in the month of November. Okay, this is a beach poem, and it has a couple of events that happen. One involved being on one of these chain links looking for kids who had disappeared while swimming. What you do is, at least when I was young, they just had the men do it. You would line up next to each other and connect hands and then go under and kick underwater until you all came up, and then you do it again. and you'd sort of go like this with your hands out and make sure you touched each other's hands so that there was no space being missed. You were going along hoping or not hoping, depending on your feelings, that you would find an arm or something and discover some missing people. That's what happens at the beginning of this. The second is a sort of farcical attempt my sister, who's 3 years older than I, made at teaching me how to swim when I was about 18 months old and was wading around in Lake Michigan. Her way to teach me to swim was to grab me by the ankle and pull me up, straight up, so that my head went straight down and my feet went up in the air. My father, who was fully dressed, had to come out and get me. This is called Prayer for a Drowned Soul. A chain of humans dips and rises in the choppy waves, dips and rises, spits water as a single whale, then moves ahead again. If we do not find an arm here or a leg there, we will have to give in to the helicopter, to the hooks that play with drowned children the way the newscaster plays with the models of a plane that killed 300. We will have to give in to the father who's lost his pipe and goes off every hour like a clock. It is a Sunday morning. My sister holds me by the feet, my head down in the water, my eyes 2 spoons as father wades in his suit from mass, only the shoes removed through the waves and the warm haze of memory, his shoes off, and my sister lets go of my feet. It is Sunday morning. What is in the basket? What is in the cold bottle everyone raises to his lips? What is the color of the hair of the girl drowned just there, just beyond the group of bathers, their swimwear modest, the hymns of Protestants glued to their hands as if a man of war had rested in them for 10 or 15 minutes. But there is really a prayer for the souls of the drowned, a thought filled with echoing sounds, the wash of sand, the small motors coughing, backfiring, then droning from a city in the night to its own drunkenness, from the way a man in a black suit can look at a man in a brown suit. There is such a prayer, and it is this: do not let this one be cold, and do not make that one look at the fish as they come for his eyes. Do not make the poor wear the clothes of the drowned, and do not let the living see them the way they glow as they stand at night by the foot of our bed. And then, the longer I live with this little group, the poem that I think should probably end the collection. It's called The Heart Is. It's a set of couplets. The heart is only a small island the boats come to at night, bumping with the waves against tiny hills of sand in the rain. The rain is only the tears of the unfashionable, floating through the canals of the face in a room where there isn't music. The music is only something we have forgotten because of the way a face looked up at us, a frightened O with a question. The question is only something that no one answers, a pause in the direction the small boats of desires take to the heart. And the heart is only a small island boats come to at night, bumping with the waves against tiny hills of sand in the rain. The hills are only sand corpses, emptied of themselves by air that takes to itself only the darkness and the sound of its name. The name is only something etched in marble, the absence that a child feels when he wakes from seeing a dead parent in a dream. The dream is only what we have left of those nights that never were so empty, that were small boats of memory in the heart. And the heart is only the small island the boats come to at night, bumping with the waves against tiny hills of sand in the rain. The waves are only resting places in the mother, in the moment when we fear those blows of air, those attacking bursts of light. The light is only morning reaching at us in banal frenzy while our fingers clutch at sleep against the birth of labor. The labor we must come to is only the caulking of the torn hulls of those vessels of regret that float at night into the heart. And the heart is that small island boats come to in the night, bumping with the waves against tiny hills of sand in the rain. Now there's a little grouping I wanted to read from also. These are poems in a cycle called Cycle for Pablo Neruda. Pablo Neruda died in Chile in 1973 after the CIA-financed Colonel's Uprising. I almost call it the Cardinals Uprising. Actually, it was more the work of the CIA and AT&T. And it's the sort of thing I tried for a number of years to work with, and ended up finding some things I had written specifically to the memory of Pablo Neruda, and some things I had written that I later found were closely related to what I had read by him and knew of him. And then I sort of bound them together, tried to sort of give them to the world in 1983, a decade after his death, but that didn't work out. It's in sections. The first is called Attitudes. When his wrists are cuffed, a man smokes a cigarette as if praying furtively, as if either his jailers or God might strike him now that the world has left him outside. When the families of the poor huddle at funerals in the front row of cheap Sunday school seats, they cringe forward as if the devil's whip already kissed their backs. And when the comfortable read poetry as if God loved them, they smile at flowers and at incense in those words that carefully turn the smaller corners of their minds. This was written in the summer of '83, the second one during the riots that tried to re-change the government of Chile, unsuccessfully. It's just called Late Summer 1983. 10 years and an epitaph writes itself in Spanish, and people still spill into the streets as they did, and hope lies beside herself in the dirt, rolls over its own body like a dog under a truck's wheels, lies as still as the master with the broken heart, his soul escaped from the prison ship as these few yellow flowers trailing after the nameless in the streets. And if I turn to you over some meditation, my breath gone, my idiot smile a void of credit and response, my 3 stages of evening, loss, dread, and insomnia, I cannot answer even a child this time, cannot sing of wings in this night of boots, or call on the young with these resignant old triumphant year and year again, their joyless dead rampant against each field of martyrs. Okay. The third is called Dusting Off the Sorrow, and it was written earlier, and I guess was sort of after avoiding it, it was sort of an agreement with myself to go ahead and write this thing. All right, haul out the old blue shirt and shake off its wrinkles, blow the dust off the lunch bucket, the bones of the father and his sad rosary, trudge down another road with what's left of hope in your left hand, the one that can play neither piano. It's true that a man stands on his country the way he stands on his gallows. It's true we are born on the birthdays of our heroes and that we die a few shriveled pieces of meat on the saucer edge of the dawns that bring in the days of assassination, holidays no one dresses up for. And me, what am I doing? Boring everyone again, forgetting to put the meals and the jokes in my songs. When will I learn that the eye wants its reds only in roses, the nose wants to smell what is cooked, the ear to listen to sounds filtered through nostalgia like doves one remembers. At a slight distance from here, perhaps only 20 years, ice is waiting to form forever over the roofs of our houses. Snow is crouched like a cougar in ambush, and a melancholy singer repeats the words of his people, when there is no more bread, stones will do. And I dust off the old sorrow again because of that and for you. And I turn in the night, as alone as each of us, the way we are when we run a single hand lightly up and down over the edges of those sills that guard windows looking out and windows looking in. phenomenology / the American scholar. The one, the many, the state, the actress dead in her second husband's car, the overproductive flesh, give us this day only one of these, or a newspaper, its little doubles of paradise laughing under the breakfasts. This one singing over the ghost of comrade that went under the same snow among pines for over 30 years. On the wall is a map of Finland, small beast between large beasts. In the parlor, a book of the nationals, alone, dressed, in group, undressed, waiting for train, personal. Or has he forgotten history, invented tragedy, become the physician in his attic, peering through a hole in the floor at a bookshelf, the wanton, the lascivious, language. Each of these works alone in his own way. The stammering theologian, the thick fur of his dog, firewood, a pie of some elegance cooling, only the children thieves, and why not that little bit of soup, both unpleasant and nothing that they serve between setup and football, corporation and her president, trained horses, hospitals nobody dies in. Okay, and this very badly Xerox, and I hope I can read the last line. This is called Poem Ending in ing for the Bishop of Fly. As fall disappears into the trees with its bald snake and its one glove, still another man of the people turns bread into prayers. Another Peter lights his rock and warms his own hands over it, while the poor contemplate sand as, finally, the answer to food, drink, and the ordinary need for small houses or for children that once played with fit back in their boxes. As another year becomes 10, evening finds the bishop sitting by the wood fire, puffing the avuncular pipe, discussing the price of warthog, a man's love for cocaine, a child and its warmest dog. Meanwhile, it's raining all along the road outside, and we haven't got enough to bribe the doorman at the elevator to the penthouse, or even 1 stone for our shoes. Yes, give us this day a day's respite from the stomach, from the red eye and its infected toe, its small shoe, and we might pray to the Marks or his Father Almighty, might make the last hungry act of contrition, but right now it's all soup. Soup this and soup that, to quote no one at all, and the letter ing, that strange death at the end of the busier verbs, captain without action, knowing finally that what is being done to us is not pleasing us, is not what we were preparing ourselves for. Okay, the next section was, in fact, based on, I think, a picture. I don't believe it was taken by Kappa, but it was a picture from the Spanish Civil War, and I used it as a sort of a rerun into the Chilean business. This is called Insomnia's Photograph. It is a picture of 7 Chilean men facing the firing squad. The third man from the left is holding a clay jar, and you know why he is doing this. You have heard the story before. He has bet a member of the firing squad the money in his pocket against a similar amount to go to his family that he will not drop the jar when he falls. They have agreed that he can drop it when the coup de grace is administered. This will not be held against him. In another version of the story, a Spanish one, he is simply holding the jar out of curiosity as a point of knowledge that might interest the captain after the squad is finished with its duties. Of course, the condemned man is doing this to concentrate on something other than the bullets that are going to tear through him like small metal tornadoes. Of course, he held his head all night long like his 6 comrades while the jar lay unnoticed at his feet. But now he knows the image of the clay shattering in his death grip and the remaining shards still wrapped in his closed fist, cutting into the palm as he lies on the ground, will drive the captain and the members of the squad to hold their wives and mistresses so tightly against the darkness tonight that they will cry out in pain. And at least some of these men will know that they are holding nothing more than clay against the moment of their death. This section is called Teaching the Oppressed for Bob Lewis, a friend of mine, who gave me a copy of a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which those of you who are in education might find interesting. It's by a Brazilian named Paulo Freire. Teaching the oppressed. First they must learn to run down bread in an open field, break its back, and then eat it before they are caught by game wardens. Then we must teach them to use their hands as cups, and that when they have wept enough, they will have salt and plenty of liquid to drink. And of course they can be taught to use the stones as their shoes, always remembering to leave them behind as they walk, each step a stone, each stone a shoe, so that the others will have shoes when they follow. And then the coal. Of course they must learn the coal. Okay, this has an epigraph. The title is Handedness, as in left and right. And the epigraph is, the sons of twin brothers are half-brothers, from a doctor. Without asking where I came from, I walked out for about 10 years before turning back. So many miles south, so many east, and then north. Where then was my father before I returned? And those children dead in their Bengali hovels, the mother, laughter of God, dust soup, a house for the dying. How do we assimilate the weak sorrows if the weak isn't there? How do we hear the voices for wrong, the enlarged eye of the word yes, and her cousin, the one who stands at the small end of the line, bowl out, hand up, jaws working, electing hunger mayor, poverty dog catcher? How do we tell the child we are sorry at the end of the day? So many words, so many blows, or just this? The back as it grows smaller, and the eye walking a road without its sign, a road that turns but doesn't turn around, a board in the right hand, a hammer, and its 3 nails in the other. And then one called Beggar's Prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy bread, thy hand, my mouth, hallowed by my knees, this road, the rain turning slowly to ice, and blessed be this house that turns its back on me, a light shining in on itself. Carefully then we see that they will always be with us. With the slow craft of the architect we build their houses, one by the sea for the rain, and one in the desert to make the most of that sun only we can own. Only those of this table laughing at the words of the man in black robes, this guest of night sleepers, of the pressed crease and the closed road, a guard at each end smiling with selection. On the next day then, dust for the soup, mud for the bowl. On the next day there are our children, there are the others, the ones without tears, without a pin to count souls on, to argue as they diminish the separated body, the mind deprived of itself, the mad philologist waiting at noon for his check, seeing the mailman the way we have learned to as he turns to the right and walks down the wrong street. And then the final piece is called Singer. Today I want to talk to you the way a singer does when his left hand caresses the neck of a guitar, the way his eyes look up asking half a question and his mouth hints at the letter O, or the voice turns, then slips in tenor over the letter S and its vowel. Today I want to exchange something with you, much as a dog did once when, jaws trembling, she dropped the infant rabbit, unhurt and damp, into my palm, the way she backed up and her tail waved just 3 times, and the way the small heart of the rabbit felt then. This morning I want to ask something, but not for help, not even for you to leave this place where you are sitting idly looking at a few words on paper. More, I want you to fail even to see me the way at dawn once a deer did as I walked by unnoticed on the road, or the way a young woman, pink with sleep, stood in the only room of their cottage and let her blanket fall from around her, then ran across the room to her lover, to his arms as I passed on the beach, my feet in the waves, and the way I looked up only once before walking on. Okay. finish with a few very new things for delectation of a couple of people who've heard all of these before. Things I worked on over the last couple of months. For some reason, all very short. Not certain exactly why. This was after seeing, I think it was that Motown special that had the Commodore singing Night Shift in it. It's called Night Shift. Just one flight down there, choosing a suit for the funeral, baking those cakes and denying the footsteps and the door closing as it does only on the music. On a day of rain, I found I could not breathe. Melancholy sister, the corporate lung, always the favorite child in uniform, asking to go the way of the father of its sky, brown as it is when we're fiscally winning. Or this, every week I write letters to pain. Nobody answers. Our friends in the post office forget their ways back to the address, or the only phone ringing is 3 flights down and we can't come awake hearing it, dress and stumble down, yawning in time for an answer, other than that metal humming in its own dark. I have no idea what most of these mean. And, it's one of the reasons I'm kind of having a good time reading them. These last ones. This is called After Storm. It's Monday morning. Is the value still there? Monday morning in the carpenter's shop, they make the stairs that go down the hill and into the sea. The old man, no lymph gland, pushes himself through the room on his walker, still makes plans, and poverty's aid, pride in one hand, mind in the other, part of each of us, lies on the surgeon's floor because even the trees are torn alive from their hills. It's Monday morning. The bright average refuse assignment, assault the beverage laws, leave the room. Where there is comfort, there is still comfort. Where there is pain, the line begins, no hands out and up. Everyone will receive a fair share. Everyone can be asked, did you do this? Add that, subtract nothing. It's Monday morning. A hill doesn't hold its trees anymore. The ashes of all parents tumble north, then south, in waves. This is called Photo Opportunity, and we've all heard that term in the last couple of years, quite a bit. Right? I mean, that's what our entire public world is now, one gigantic photo opportunity. I noticed nobody else understood this. I guess I shouldn't even bring it up because nobody quite noticed it the way I did, but it appeared to me that the Russians in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, having noticed that we've been casting the same actor as our leader for the last 5 years, have come up with Rod Steiger as theirs. The next time you see Gorbachev, think of that. Okay, photo opportunity. A small interdepartmental group of persons meets in the cellar, chews its opium, and orders the ducks south, but 2 months early. Or invents sugarcane slavery's mentor, because each one is the chairperson of something. All right, this is the party forming left and right. These are the minutes of the last meeting. Old business on the table of the organization for the deforming of history. We see Lincoln, the actor, no real blood, or anyone else at the white sales. We find Jesus as the last reason to lower the price of a nightgown. Let's face it, this goes no place and returns. World War II as the reason for baseball, or the acting leaders in the picture, backs missing from their dark suits, no shoes, but still as aware of the hairspray of camera as that matador's immortal brother. There's a picture in Hemingway's Death in the Afternoon of a dying matador in the chapel of the Bull Ring, surrounded by his relatives and friends. And in the caption, Hemingway points out that except for one person, everyone but the dying except for the dying matador and one other person in the picture, everyone else in the picture is aware primarily of the fact that their picture is being taken. And then you look back around you and they're all going sort of like that. This is called Off, and it was written while I was reading a bunch of things by the Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo, and uses a few lines of his as an epigraph. Numerous family were leaving not too long ago. No one stands watch tonight, and no candle is burning for our return. From Drill Chip. No one can see when the poor kid's box why the one pair of gloves goes to its owner. No one can see the graves, odd blood, on both sides of the street, the round mitt of the elder first baseman, the heavier bat, or why I want those beads now after such burial. Now the car leaves with its children. We wait here for the call, straddling our century, or too heavily on either side, guilty of both. Enough essay. Once I rode a horse, a jet plane, an escalator. Once I saw the bones in my foot, and on the city bus, a day as steamy as now, my youth got on in that stranger's face, never saw me, then left with briefcase at the wrong stop. I told you I didn't understand a lot of these things. This is called sharing a guilt. Like a blanket thrown quickly over the huddled figure of a child dead by violence, these words can be no solace. They are a reminder of shape without definition, the smell of death covered by perfume. The politician stands too long on the platform, and we all wish we were home. Here, take this quickly, then turn away. When you're alone, you can look at it in silence with no one at your shoulder. Then think of something not to say. Remove a lying blanket for a change. This is called Professor of Energy, and it's written after a poem by Ruben Dario called To Roosevelt, 1904. It's to Theodore Roosevelt, and takes as an epigraph the first 4 lines of that poem. You are the United States. You are the future invader of the naive America that has indigenous blood, that still prays to Jesus and still speaks in Spanish. And that still waits for our flames to engulf her peasants, those flames that destroy them to save us, keep us alive in the northern jungles of chrome and concrete. Today, as I dozed above waves, the corporate helicopter grazed our hill, its breath making the jack pines wince as investors looked down on the hand-painted cottages that photograph wood to be ripped out to make rooms for vast condominiums, cleaned by women who speak broken English, who tremble in the kitchens of the rich when La Migra comes to call. When men in blue suits demand green cards from men with no suits and without green cards, who will be sent home to get the bullet we place with their future in the same place in the heart that went out of their north more than 80 years ago, more than 180, and that no poet in Spanish can replace to save his own, either by calling on Whitman or Lincoln or the other tombs we've robbed as we piled kindling beneath other tiny lands as we lectured on energy that eats and eats and eats. It's hard one to breathe with. I forgot it was all one sentence. This is called Greens. In the correctional system of New York State, the inmates wear green. Today I occupy the body of an old convict, maybe Matt, who told me he would never see the streets again in this life, and whose eyes would follow the younger inmates out of the room when they'd leave for the water fountain against the green wall across the corridor, or the large door and wallless space set into it and called a bathroom. Maybe Mac, whose cheap eyeglasses mirrored the face of the white store detective going blank as the word please sighed out through his lips with his life at the other end of Mac's life on a sidewalk over 30 years ago. Or maybe Chris, who made the streets at 58 and was last seen up in Harlem, shrinking inside a trench coat and growing too small for the pair of stolen 45s the trench coat hid. In Times Square, where all the corridors to the cell blocks cross, there was always an empty wheelchair made of cheap aluminum tubing and green canvas. Its resident had died after a second or third stroke, but Mac said more than once that was sure to come in handy again. Times Square, Attica, in the prison in Attica, is a large sort of open place with guards around it, and doors onto it from all of the blocks, the cell blocks that the men live in. Okay, this I wrote in 2 versions, and didn't really do it on purpose. I wrote along, and then suddenly I had written the second version, and I put them together as one poem. Each is what, 9 or 10 lines long. It's called A Moment. It's a memory from quite a while back. Some days I would shave my father's neck. He would come to me with the cup filled with lather and the boar's bristle brush and the razor and turn his back to me. The hair stood in a straight line on the back of my father's neck, and I would hesitate, looking at the whiskers spilling under that line, then begin to shave my father's neck, and he would hum in a low, quiet voice, and my hand would remain steady as it whisked the black stubble down and away in quick, careful strokes from his neck. The second part. Some days in the summer when I was home for school, my father would ask me to shave the loose hairs from his neck, and he'd stand with his head down as I did. And after each stroke, I would rinse the hairs from the razor under the hot water tap in the bathroom sink, then lift my right hand, pause, then sweep down again across the stubbled hair at the back of his neck, and then rinse, and then pause, and then move again down and over the whiskers that grew beneath the hairline on the vulnerable, waiting back of my father's neck. Well, I think that says something about the fixations this guy's got. This is called Growing Pains, and I guess it has a couple reasons for being called that. Okay. This was written right after I had taken a nap, and a lot of the sort of hyperbole that goes on in the brain between sleep and waking. A man wakes from his afternoon nap in a panic, notes the storm that threatened when he fell asleep, passed over without striking, hears his daughter swatting flies to feed her finches downstairs and the electric rattle of his wife's typewriter, and doubles over swiftly with a sharp pain in his chest. Sometimes these poems are lessons in penmanship, so little happens in them. People die in foreign crises, and my clumsy fingers battle fatly with a few egocentric words. He looks at his watch. It tells him the afternoon has passed and that he is nearly 50. He remembers its date is 2 days fast, although it correctly tells him Tuesday, and wonders if that means he is only 35 or 40. But the pain is gas or something just as transient, and he is saved again. This happens at least 3 times every week. Whack! The fly swatter kills another fly against the window. The typewriter rattles on. In the yard next door, a workman begins to whistle a Protestant hymn. Its first 2 lines go, "Just a closer walk with thee, granted Jesus, if you please." That amuses me. Okay, just a couple more. And we'll be done here. This is called Talking to Myself, and it uses an epigraph by the Spanish poet Antonio Machado, a line that goes, "Men who talk to themselves hope to talk to God one day." Stiff, aching like a boxer on his day off, my father worked his slow and painful way to heaven. 52 years with my mother snapping at his heels like a discontented mastiff, from paint job to shingle to lawn. All that time he muttered, into his beads or without them, groaning up the stairs or bending out from the chair in the kitchen she locked him in when the sons of the rich came with their smiles, then walked into the night holding his daughter's hand to the cars of their fathers, cars he couldn't drive. And now, with a job I despise, with an old house creaking like a nun's shawl around my shoulders, I've stumbled more than once around my corners and into the accidental path of a daughter's grin. "You were talking to yourself," she'd say. And I'd turn and trudge as slowly as I can back to the room I've left, looking into these hands that lift at night like large, fat large fat cups to catch tears that stare back bland and naked as infants, uncalloused, useless, empty of those beads I put into the dirt with him those years ago. And I walk slowly as I can to that door without a handle and no one behind it waiting on the other side. See, I push against it now. I enter and it closes fast behind me, and the sound you hear is my voice trailing off to nothing as we disappear. Growing old isn't horrible. It's silly sometimes. Okay. Two more. This is called Poem in Available Light. One of the things, I don't know how many other writers do this, one of the things I do is try to think of writing the way people who work with their hands do, people who sculpt and paint and build things. So I like to wear work boots when I'm writing a poem all day, you know. I like to own pickup trucks and then, oh, I'm hammering that damn poem all day, worked up a real sweat. I've had a few beers now. So this is called Poem in Available Light, and it begins with another conceit that I like when I'm working. Dressed in heavy denim, I sit beside the open window, writing these words as the wind-torn pine at the head of our hill slowly vanishes in fog, swirling off the lake. The women on the beach despair of sun and gather radios and towels into their arms as their sons threaten them with buckets of chilly water. The mothers' voices sound like the boys'. Only the child with a brace of leather and metal on one leg makes the sound of an adult. A cold wind filled with hints of water pours through the open window, and a workman's saw screams in metal at double speed as dim thunder gives birth to itself behind the fog. First drops spatter my desk, this paper. If the storm hits now, I will never end this poem. Okay, and I'll end with this from a series of titles from Charlie Parker albums. The saxophonist Charlie Parker made a lot of cuts that were partial, and they'd stop with a whistle or a shout, and then he'd start the same song over again because somebody had done something that didn't fit in with the rest. So this is called Ornithology 2, Take 1, and has an epigraph from a prose elegy for the sculptor Alberto Sanchez, written by the poet Pablo Neruda, which goes, "It was only natural that the bourgeoisie of Madrid should react violently against him. Those dullers had codified realism, the repetition of form, the bad photograph of a smile or a flower, the tediousness that copies the whole and its detail, the death of interpretation, imagination, and creation were the apex of the official culture of Spain. Neither is it surprising that fascism would raise its head nearby, adding its dark limitations and its rigid restrictions to further subject man. These birds have dull red heads and rusty shoulders. They fling themselves against the kitchen window when we're making bread. Their droppings scald the finish of our cars. I saw one on TV one night explaining the national debt and the need for the world's burnt flesh. His smiling was startling. I loved him immediately. Let's pause a minute. I like the bread on the second line, the sense of it rising odorously in my oven, my tongue anticipating it. The rest makes me sick. I've done it again. I've failed to make a world better than I woke up to this morning. And here, they gave me that new hammer just last week. The guilt in me turns to a herd of skittering mice and dives into holes in the wall, darkness, silence. The reason the enforcers call it a mug book is that it contains the photographs of souls that disappeared after they were mugged by God, man, and the administration, that third thing that enters us from the rear, takes our hat, coat, and radio, and leaves us trembling and speaking desperately in tongues. Maybe it's true, as the archangel says, that the only doors were made for the rest of us to walk out through. But each time we do this, the bad torn down, no good to replace it, slap up the bad again against laths that twist like a juggernaut sun. Does the mother refuse cookie, the father replace car key in his pocket? You don't want this. Every time the phone rings, it's another daughter pregnant, another son in jail, and you're always asking the wrong one why. No, I'm sorry. His poems sound like prose, like letters to his mother, arguments with the oxymoronic. I can't understand my own divorce from them. Maybe it's the decade, but I think I'll have bacon instead. Thank you. Oh, fresh hot books for sale. Ken?
Yes.
Good. I'm gonna find this up.
Are you, Allison?
I'm from what you call a mixed marriage. My mother was sort of Billy Graham, Gerry Falwell fundamentalist. My father's was Irish Catholic, and I was sort of bounced back and forth like a ping pong ball between. I had a cousin who was a priest who was going at me from one side, and I had evangelists on the other side going at me. So I got kind of a nice view of both sides.
But it's always been moving to Protestant.
Well, bishops too. Try to give them both.
That reminds me of, there's an Irish writer, Ari, I guess, like the Irish Echo. He wrote a book, titled Too Long Sacrifice. He lived in Northern Ireland.
Austria, I know. Is it Shamsin?
No, not he.
No. I know the name if I heard it.
Yeah.
It's not Kinsella, right?
No, it's a younger guy than that.
About 38.
Yeah.
Maybe a little older. This is Brooklyn now. But he had the same experience,
Same
Irish,
mixture.
Protestant, and he didn't realize until he went and lived in the Protestant area with his grandma.
So you
And
got
maybe he was waiting for the bus to break on going after
them all.
him.
His handbook goes with